Welcome to the fifth and final webinar in the Power of Writing series. This webinar is designed to help students write across the curriculum. It will show you how to use writing as a tool to strengthen reading comprehension and to enhance learning across the curriculum. Examples for integrating writing instruction in content and technical areas, particularly at the secondary level, are provided. Many of you today may be teachers dedicated to teaching English, while others may be teaching different content areas and want more information on how to incorporate writing across your content area or technical area. Some things to consider as well are common language. Does revise or draft mean the same thing to all students? Tiered vocabulary. What does vocabulary instruction look like in other content areas? And aligned appropriate tasks. Are tasks aligned and appropriate for both students and content area? As we come to the end of our secondary writing series, it is our hope that you now have a little better understanding of the writing process. We've discussed all of the components of the writing process as well as the way the process works. One last reminder, reading and writing are reciprocal processes, each developing fluency in the other. As we've reached the end of the webinar, how have your views changed of the writing? If your views were consistent with the material presented, what was solidified for you? So now let's look at the way we can use writing to enhance learning across all subject areas. As we look at the 21st century skills, as well as preparing students to be college and career ready, it becomes imperative that students become not only adept at communication, but also making connections. The process of making connections allows students to utilize both prior and new knowledge to create new ideas, synthesize information, communicate information, and become true lifelong learners. Let's look at some of the shifts in ELA. Shift 1 was to focus on reading and writing to inform, persuade, and convey experiences. Shift 2 is a focus on increased text complexity. Shift 3 was a focus on speaking and listening. Shift 4 was a focus on text-based evidence for argumentation. And Shift 5 is a focus on academic vocabulary and language, tiers 1, 2, and 3. So what does this mean to you? How does your campus measure up? What about your classroom? Let's look at the grade distribution of literary and informational passages in 2009 NAEP framework and at the shift from literary text to informational text. Grade 4 is 50-50. Grade 8 starts to move from 45% literary text to 55% informational text, then to 30% literacy text and a whopping 70% informational text. How does that correlate to what we've learned in the prior webinars about writing types? And what specifically do we expect students to know when they are college and career ready? To be successful, students will need to be able to demonstrate independence, understand complex text in all content areas, participate as speakers and listeners in academic discussions and presentations, direct their own learning, and utilize resources. They need to be able to build strong content knowledge across all subject areas and disciplines. Cross-discipline knowledge is important for students' writing and discussions. Students should engage in research and study skills needed to build content knowledge. Students need to be able to respond to the varying demands of audience, task, purpose, and discipline. Students communicate through speaking and writing with a range of audiences and are knowledgeable about the variances of discipline-specific evidence. Students need to be able to comprehend as well as critique. Students learn this skill as they read and listen to others. They are able to ask questions, evaluate information, and discern reasonableness. Students need to be able to value evidence. They need to be able to provide evidence in their own oral and written discourse and expect others to furnish evidence. To use technology and digital media strategically and capably. They should integrate online and offline resources and use communication and critical thinking in their digital lives. And finally, to be college and career ready, students need to be able to understand other perspectives and cultures. To better communicate with and learn from alongside people, students should understand a wide range of cultural and experiential backgrounds. Writing promotes learning. Often students must research, synthesize, infer content, vocabulary, and integrate new and prior knowledge to write. Integration of writing and the writing process promotes student participation, a diversity of student voices, and engages students as critical thinkers while promoting their text as important resources and thinking tools. Effective writing instruction integrates disciplines. Opportunities to write in every class develops good writers. Using writing as part of instruction can be used in every classroom. And only by practicing the thinking and writing conventions of an academic discipline will students begin to communicate effectively within that discipline. It is often difficult to find the time to plan within the content area, much less cross-content in middle and high school. However, planning to integrate writing is a key to success for both the content area teachers and the writing process. Does your campus have some common practices in place to ensure a common procedure and language in regards to the writing process? So writing in the subject areas usually consists of two types: writing to learn and writing to demonstrate knowledge. Let's look at these two areas in depth. Writing to learn. Why is writing to learn important to secondary students in content areas? It's important because it fosters critical thinking and learning. It is writing that uses impromptu, short, or informal writing tasks designed by the teacher, which are included throughout the lesson to help students think through key concepts and ideas. Writing to learn activities encourage the kind of reflection on learning that improves students' metacognitive skills. Metacognitive skills can sometimes be termed as thinking about their thinking. The key to effectively using writing activities in every subject lies in matching the right activity to the learning situation. As you select writing strategies, ask yourself, how well suited is this task for the objective the students are learning? Does this strategy fit my students' abilities and needs? Will this strategy complement the way my students will be assessed on the content later? Assigned writing in all classes and courses helps students keep their writing skills sharp. Students become better readers, thinkers, and learners in a discipline by processing their ideas through writing. Writing assigned across the curriculum also helps students prepare for the day in and day out communicative tasks they'll face on the job, no matter what the job is. Equally important, students need to learn how writing is used within a discipline. Utilizing many different kinds of writing assignments gives students practice with a variety of disciplinary forms and conventions. So why assign writing in your classes? Students will learn more content and will leave your classroom better prepared to face thinking and communication challenges, to communicate clearly, to clarify thinking, to learn new concepts and information, and to engage in types of writing practice that will enhance students' future academic and work opportunities. Here are some tasks that would align to writing to learn: journals, logs, micro-themes, responses to written or oral questions, summaries, free writing, notes, and other writing assignments that align to learning ideas and concepts. So let's move on to the second type of writing, writing to demonstrate knowledge. A writing to demonstrate knowledge assignment is one that teachers employ when they assign reports, essays, persuasive writing letters and papers, and research papers. When writing to demonstrate knowledge, students show what they have learned by synthesizing information and explaining their understanding of concepts and ideas. Students write for an audience with a specific purpose. Products may apply knowledge in new ways or use academic structures for research and/or formal writing. In writing to demonstrate knowledge, students adhere to format and style guidelines or standards typical of professional papers, such as reports, article reviews, and research papers. These should be checked before being submitted by the student for correctness of spelling, grammar, and transition word usage. This writing will require modeling and scaffolding for students, especially when using a specific format such as APA or MLA. Here are some tasks that align for writing to demonstrate knowledge: reports, essays, persuasive writing letters and papers, and finally research papers. As the skills and information students acquire become more heavily interrelated, the more structured students' learning is. This more easily allows for the metacognitive transfer of knowledge from one situation to the next and supports students' progressive scaffolded growth. So instead of thinking about how different your area of expertise is from other disciplines, begin to consider how you can start a conversation with colleagues about what all your subjects actually have in common. Here are some things to consider. Differentiation. Secondary students also will need different levels of differentiation based on abilities. Scaffolding. Scaffolding may be needed for students. Remember, this is imperative, especially if this is a new skill or concept. Scaffolding for students helps set them up for success. Common planning times can be helpful when utilized to help plan learning experiences that incorporate multiple subjects. Planning is a key to success, and by having a dedicated weekly time to meet helps increase connection and collaboration. Common language. Having a common language is very important for students. It's important to ensure that all disciplines are using a common language. Using a common language helps increase student retention. Students are notorious for the "I've never seen this before" or "my teacher never taught us this." Think about it. Having a common language lessens confusion and increases accountability. Students and all teachers are on the same page and know it. Productive student talk. Productive student talk is one way to incorporate pre-writing strategies into content area writing. Allowing students to have collaborative conversations about content area is definitely one way to ensure that they are better prepared to write across the curriculum. Cognitive rigor. Cognitive rigor can be increased by allowing students to make connections and cluster standards. As cognitive rigor increases, students can use writing across content areas to make real-world connections. And finally, vocabulary. As we equip students to be ready for the 21st century, vocabulary development is an important piece of the puzzle. Vocabulary has become a deficit area for students in many ways. In the next several slides, I want to discuss the importance of vocabulary, tier words, and best practices. A man with a scant vocabulary will almost certainly be a weak thinker. The richer and more copious one's vocabulary and the greater one's awareness of fine distinctions and subtle nuances of meaning, the more fertile and precise is likely to be one's thinking. Knowledge of things and knowledge of the words for them grow together. If you do not know the words, you can hardly know the thing. Many students are lacking important vocabulary. Helping students develop vocabulary can help level the playing field for all students. So think back to a time that you used a vocabulary word incorrectly. How did you feel? What did you do? As educators, many of us would ensure we learn the word so we are able to use it correctly the second time. But what about your students? Sometimes vocabulary development is overwhelming. Let's break down the tiers of words. Look at the pyramid illustrating the tier of words. What are some conclusions you can draw from looking at it in regards to frequency? Tier 1 consists of everyday speech. Tier 2 are often referred to as general academic words and are far more likely to appear in written text than in speech. Tier 3 is referred to as domain-specific words. They are words that are specific to a field of study. Let's look a little deeper into each of the tiers. So you may be asking why vocabulary is being incorporated so specifically into this webinar on writing. As I mentioned in the past webinars in this series, the right word is really important. As you will notice by the pyramid, most of the students' vocabulary will consist of basic and general vocabulary, followed by descriptive vocabulary, and then precision vocabulary of Tier 3. Why is this important? Students will hear mainly Tier 1 vocabulary in their spoken conversations, but we know that best practices in writing require Tier 2 and 3 vocabulary, especially in regards to content-specific writing. Let's look at some examples. Let's look at the word old. Old is a Tier 1 word. It means that something has aged. Most everyone knows what the word means, but it's not very specific. Old has some other nuances in meaning with perception and usage. In Tier 2, for the word old, we would find words such as enduring, aging, mature, elderly. This helps strengthen the definition and helps solidify some of the nuances in meaning. For example, someone who is 40 might be considered old by a young child, but are not considered elderly. The descriptive vocabulary allows readers and writers to more aptly define their vocabulary to create a clearer picture. Tier 3 deals with precise vocabulary and is even more specific in its meaning. Tier 3 words define even more clearly and concisely the intent. In Tier 3, we find words for old might be antique, ancient, decrepit. These Tier 3 words help students paint a clear picture of meaning with their words. Let's look at a few other examples. This slide shows fire or flame as a Tier 1 word. Remember, almost everyone knows what they mean. Tier 2 words are blaze and fiery. Does this more descriptive vocabulary help you paint a clearer picture? And now let's look at Tier 3, conflagration and inferno. These words are very image specific. So why are academic words or even those Tier 2 words important? They're important because they are critical to understanding academic text. They appear in all sorts of text. They require deliberate effort to learn, unlike Tier 1 words. As I said before, they are far more likely to appear in written text than in speech. They often represent subtle or precise ways to say otherwise relatively simple things, and they are seldom heavily scaffolded by authors or teachers, unlike Tier 3 words. So why are Tier 3 words important? Tier 3 words consist of low-frequency words that occur in specific domains, such as subjects in school, hobbies, occupations, technology, weather. We usually learn these words when a specific need arises, such as learning about amino acids during a chemistry lesson. Examples of other Tier 3 words in school might be economics, isotope, asphalt, multiplication. The remaining 400,000 words in English fall in this tier. Students will learn most Tier 3 words at school or in a specific learning experience. It must be strategically and specifically taught, as most students will be unfamiliar with this level. So writing sprouts conceptual brain networks. The construction of conceptual memory networks builds the most valuable neural architecture a brain owner can have. These networks serve as nets to catch and hold new input with similar patterns and work when activated for creative transfer. Use of the information learned in one context for application in a new context. Concept networks are the valuable tools the brain uses in the highest orders of thinking. When the brain seeks to predict the best response, answer, solution to a problem, or make a choice, the executive function control networks in the prefrontal cortex send out messages to the memory association areas, such as the hippocampus and memory storing cortex of each hemisphere. These messages activate stored and prior knowledge and memories that relate to the new situation. The more extensive the brain's collection of memory networks, the more successful it will be in activating the best prior knowledge to predict the best responses, answers, and choices for any new situation. The greater the links and cross connections among networks of stored information, the greater a person's access to multiple storage centers of background knowledge to use in response to a new problem or opportunity. So think of writing as memory cement and concept clues. Memory bundles, such as Piaget's schema, contain category-related information linked in circuits based on commonalities, such as similar sounds or visual images. These bundles of neurons are linked together because they have been used together repeatedly. The many varieties of writing can serve to guide the brain to recognize, construct, and extend its patterns. Writing can illustrate sequential procedures that students need to learn in mathematics and science, from factoring an equation to the photosynthetic chemical process. Prior knowledge can be activated to link with new input through writing and drawing mind maps or graphic organizers, and new learning can be added into visible and mental patterns when students write analogies and other comparisons. The neural activity or mental manipulation that transforms formulas, procedures, graphs, and statistical analysis into words represents the brain's recognition of patterns. When this is also done in writing, the facts, procedures, and observations are processed symbolically in the writing process, giving the memory another storage modality and truly illuminating the patterns for the brain to follow as it adds new learning to existing concept networks. Look at your classroom's learning environment. Is it set up to take the most advantage of student engagement? Does it lend itself to collaboration and experiences? Brain research shows that allowing students multiple modalities as well as learner mobility, students have increased retention of knowledge. Remember when we discussed how to write to demonstrate knowledge? Do you have your learning environment set up with opportunities to allow students a place to scaffold knowledge with collaborative conversations as part of pre-writing? The pen or crayon, computer or tablet has become the sword. Information and the ability to communicate is imperative to future success. There are many different ways that our students will need writing to help them navigate the changing and sometimes scary waters of the future. Writing to learn and writing to demonstrate knowledge allows all students skills that will help them in the future. As secondary teachers, it will be imperative to remember that you are the last weapon or class and should be releasing students to fight the good fight themselves. Hopefully this writing webinar inspired you to take risk and to have more writing in your classroom. It is not just for knowledge, but hopefully will instill a love of writing that will give your students a weapon to help them forge the unknown future ahead. So thank you. As we've reached the end of the webinar, how have your views changed of the writing process? If your views were consistent with the material presented, what was solidified for you? Sometimes we see the writing process as writing for the sake of writing, but hopefully after this series, the benefits of writing across all subject areas has been shown for all students. Thank you for your commitment to the future of your students. You are making a difference.